Welcome to Miami.
I'm Miami. Ow, ow. You lost weight,
The Buster Web in the building.
The morning of December 8, 2014, began like any other in the Fairfax district of Los Angeles. But the silence of the Park La Brea apartment complex was about to be shattered by a sequence of events that would leave the world of entertainment in a state of total disbelief. It started just after 7 a.m. Residents on Hauser Boulevard were jarred awake not by their alarms, but by the piercing sounds of a woman's voice, Stephanie Mosley, screaming for her life. These were not the sound of minor domestic dispute. These were the raw, gut-wrenching cries of someone facing their final moments. Within seconds, the screams were replaced by the sharp, rhythmic crack of gunfire. Then a heavy, suffocating silence fell over the hallway, only to be broken moments later by a second round of shots. When the LAPD arrived, they didn't find a typical crime scene. They found a fortified apartment and a situation so volatile it required a SWAT team to breach the door. But as the tactical units moved in, the most jarring detail was yet to come. This wasn't just a private tragedy occurring in a vacuum. On the other end of a frantic FaceTime call was Floyd Mayweather, one of the most famous athletes on the planet, who reportedly watched and listened as the situation reached its violent conclusion. The world knew Stephanie Mosley as a rising star, a talented dancer from Vancouver who had graced the screen in the Twilight Saga and VH1's Hit the Floor.
I was home, I guess, last year, and I got the call for the Devil Girls, for this new dance TV series that was going to be filmed in LA, and I literally, was like, this is it. This is what I've been waiting for. This is what I want. This is what I worked for. This is it. I was like, this is mine. Everything about it, I was like, it's mine. It's mine. It just is mine. And, I went to the audition, and I was like, nope, it's mine. And I got called for another audition. I was like, nope, it's mine. And then when I got sides for an acting role. I was like, yes, it's mine. I got given a name, I'm Morelli, it's every dream come true.
Her husband, Earl Hayes, was a rapper with deep connections to the elite circles of the music industry. By all public accounts, they were a power couple attempting to reconcile their differences. So, what changed in those early morning hours? What was the unbelievable discovery that pushed Hayes over the edge, leading him to take his wife's life before taking his own? Before we go inside that apartment, if you're a fan of deep dive true crime investigations, hit that subscribe button. It helps us continue to tell these stories with the respect they deserve. We are looking at a case where the glitz of Hollywood met a devastating, reality-shattering end. This is a story of Stephanie Mosley and the discovery that changed everything. Los Angeles is a city built on the foundation of reinvention. Long before the neon lights of Hollywood Boulevard or the high-rise luxury of the Fairfax district, this land was a quiet expanse of coastal basin. Founded in 1781 by a small group of 44 settlers known as Los Pobladores, the city began its life under Spanish rule. These original settlers traveled from New Spain, modern-day Mexico, to establish a farming community that would eventually become one of the most influential metropolises on Earth. By 1849, the city transitioned to United States control, but the real explosion of growth didn't happen until the arrival of the Santa Fe Railroad in 1885. This connection to the rest of the country brought a wave of migrants from the Midwest, all chasing a dream of sunshine, citrus groves, and a fresh start. One of the neighborhoods that emerged from this expansion was Fairfax. Nestled in the heart of the city, Fairfax became a cultural hub, eventually housing the iconic Park La Brea complex on Hauser Boulevard. Built to offer a park-like atmosphere in the middle of a burgeoning urban landscape, Park La Brea became a coveted address for those climbing the ladder of success in the entertainment industry. It was designed to be a sanctuary, a place where the elite could live in security and style. But as with any major city, the City of Angels has always wrestled with a shadow side that the postcards rarely show. Despite its status as a global playground for the rich and famous, Los Angeles maintains a complex relationship with violent crime. Statistical data reveals a sobering reality for those living within its limits. There's approximately a 1 in 139 chance of becoming a victim of a violent offense, a category that includes robbery, assault, and murder. For property crimes, those odds tighten significantly to 1 in '67. The Fairfax district, while upscale, has not been immune to these trends. Historically, the area has seen fluctuations in crime, particularly regarding vehicle burglaries and total offenses leading up to the late 2010s. However, the year 2025 brought a surprising shift in the city's narrative. Homicides across Los Angeles saw a dramatic 19% decrease compared to 2024, reaching levels not seen since 1966. Experts point to a combination of fewer illegal firearms on the streets and a high clearance rate, with detectives solving roughly 68% of homicide cases. This downturn in violence makes the events of December 2014 stand out even more. In a city that was slowly becoming safer, the brutal nature of what occurred in that apartment on Hauser Boulevard served as a reminder that the most dangerous threats aren't always found on a dark street corner. Sometimes, the greatest danger is waiting behind a locked door in a luxury complex. To understand the weight of what was lost on Hauser Boulevard, you have to look at the life of the woman who occupied that apartment. Stephanie Elise Mosley was born on February 14, 1984, in Vancouver, British Columbia. From her earliest years in Canada, it was clear that Stephanie was destined for a life in the spotlight. Growing up in a supportive environment, her family recognized her natural grace and athletic ability, encouraging her to pursue dance and performance with a level of dedication that few children possess. She wasn't just a hobbyist. She was a technician of movement. By the time she made the move from the Pacific Northwest to the intense competition of Los Angeles, Stephanie had transformed herself into a powerhouse. She quickly began landing roles that placed her alongside some of the biggest names in Hollywood. Her filmography reads like a highlight reel of the early 2010s. She appeared in the visually stunning Mirror Mirror in 2012, worked on the cult favorite Idlewild, and secured a place in the massive cultural phenomenon of the Twilight Saga, Breaking Dawn, Part 1. However, it was on the small screen where Stephanie truly became a household name for many fans. As a featured dancer on VH1's hit scripted series Hit the Floor, she showcased a peak of her physical craft. She wasn't just background talent. She was a presence, a woman whose energy and optimism were noted by everyone from casting directors to fellow background actors. Public records and social media archives paint a picture of a woman deeply invested in her community. Even years later, tribute pages maintained by thousands of followers serve as a digital monument to her influence. In 2008, Stephanie's personal and professional lives merged when she married Earl Warren Hayes. At the time, it felt like a natural union between two people on the rise. Hayes was a rapper with a significant footprint in the industry, and together, they navigated the high-pressure world of Los Angeles celebrity. Friends describe her as a grounding force in a relationship, someone who remained optimistic even when the industry's demands became overwhelming. Despite the fame, Stephanie never had children, focusing her energy on her craft and her marriage. By late 2014, she told her family in Canada that she was feeling positive about the future. She believed she was on the verge of a new chapter, one of reconciliation and growth. She had no way of knowing that the very person she was trying to build a future was already harboring the suspicions that would lead to her end. While Stephanie was climbing the ladder of Hollywood success, her husband, Earl Warren Hayes, was carving out his own space in the music industry. As a rapper and producer, Hayes wasn't just another artist struggling to be heard. He was deeply embedded in the inner circle of the Money Team, the elite entourage surrounding boxing legend Floyd Mayweather. This connection gave Hayes a level of status and access that many in the industry envied. He was often seen in the company of champions, moving through a world defined by extreme wealth and high-stakes competition. But within the walls of their Park La Brea apartment, the reality was far less glamorous. The marriage between the two had reached a breaking point earlier, in 2014. The couple had actually separated, a move that many thought would be the final chapter of their 7-year relationship. However, in the days leading up to December 8th, there was a shift. Stephanie, ever the optimist, had told her inner circle that they were working on things. They were attempting a reconciliation, trying to piece back together a bond that had been frayed by the pressures of their careers. To those on the outside, it looked like a recovery. To Hayes, it was a period of intense internal friction. The unbelievable discovery that triggered the final tragedy was a psychological discovery fueled by unfounded suspicion. Hayes had become convinced that Stephanie was being unfaithful. Specifically, he became obsessed with rumors involving the R&B singer Trey Songz. Despite the fact that Stephanie was actively trying to save their marriage and had recently expressed her commitment to the relationship, Hayes could not silence the noise in his own head. This brand of jealousy is a silent killer in many domestic situations. It doesn't always start with physical act. It starts with a narrative that one person builds until they can no longer see the truth. Friends of the couple were blindsided. They describe Hayes as a man who was generally nonviolent, someone who seemed to have his life under control. No one saw the internal break coming. Jealousy is a recurring theme in many of the cases we cover. Have you ever seen a situation in your own city where a lack of trust spiraled out of control? Let me know where you're watching from and your thoughts in the comments. It's important to talk about these patterns because, as we see in this case, the distance between a happy reconciliation and a total catastrophe can be incredibly thin. For Earl Hayes, the suspicion became his entire reality, overriding years of history and the very future Stephanie was trying to protect. The events of December 8th, 2014, shifted from a private domestic dispute to a high-profile tragedy in the span of a few frantic minutes. Shortly before 7:30 a.m., the LAPD received a surge of emergency calls from the Park La Brea complex. Neighbors reported a sequence of events that felt like a nightmare. The unmistakable sound of a woman's screams, followed by a sudden burst of gunfire. According to witness statements, there was a brief, haunting period of silence after the initial shots, before a second volley rang out to the halls of the 300 block of Hauser Boulevard. When officers arrived on the scene, they were met with a locked door and a situation that was rapidly escalating into a standoff. Because of the reports of active gunfire, a SWAT team was summoned to perform a tactical breach. As they moved through the apartment, they discovered a scene of absolute devastation. In the bathroom, they found the bodies of 30-year-old Stephanie Mosley and 34-year-old Earl Hayes. Both had succumbed to gunshot wounds. The evidence indicated that Hayes had turned the weapon on Stephanie before taking his own life. But as investigators began to process the scene, a surreal detail emerged that linked the tragedy to the highest levels of the sports world. Detectives learned that Earl Hayes had been on a FaceTime call with boxing champion Floyd Mayweather during the lead-up to the violence. Reports suggest that Mayweather was an unwilling witness to the unraveling of his friend's mental state, allegedly hearing the shots as they were fired. This wasn't just a crime of passion. It was a broadcasted catastrophe. The presence of a witness of such stature added a layer of complexity to the investigation, as detectives sought Mayweather's input to understand the final words and mindset of the man behind the trigger. Inside the apartment, the search yielded further questions. Along with a handgun used in the crime, authorities recovered approximately 10 pounds of marijuana, estimated to be worth around $40,000. While the role of the narcotics in the morning's events remained unclear, it added a jarring contrast to the public image of the couple. The unbelievable discovery Hayes believed he had made about Stephanie's loyalty had completely eclipsed the life they had built together. In those final moments, the success, the high-profile friendships, and the career milestones meant nothing to a man consumed by a false narrative. The events that took place on Hauser Boulevard serve as a devastating reminder that the public image of success can often mask a private reality of instability. Stephanie Mosley was a woman at the peak of her professional life, a light in the entertainment industry whose talent was matched only by her optimistic outlook. Yet behind the scenes, she was navigating the volatile landscape of a partner's unfounded suspicions. This case highlights a critical lesson that status and achievement do not provide immunity from the darker impulses of human nature. One of the most striking elements of this story is the illusion created by social media and professional reputations. Friends and colleagues described Earl Hayes as a man who was generally nonviolent, someone who moved in the inner circles of the world's most elite athletes and artists. To the outside observer, there were no obvious indicators that he was capable of such a final, violent act. It forces us to look at the reality of domestic incidents. They do not always follow a visible trajectory of escalation. Sometimes, the break happens internally, fueled by a narrative of jealousy that overrides years of history and shared dreams. The tragedy of Stephanie Mosley is also a story about the danger of a false discovery. Hayes allowed a rumor to become his entire truth, a psychological trap that led him to destroy the very person he claimed to love. There's a profound lesson here about the importance of communication and the heavy cost of allowing obsession to replace reality. Stephanie had expressed her commitment to the marriage. She was working toward a future that her husband was already planning to end. For the viewers watching this, the takeaway is the importance of recognizing the weight of these internal struggles before they reach a point of no return. We see a life of immense potential cut short not because of a lack of rather than the years of discipline and grace that defined her rise. The silence that fell over Hauser Boulevard that December morning eventually gave way to a conversation-specific moment where the truth could have changed the outcome. Share this video to spread awareness about Stephanie's story and honor the career she built with such passion. Thank you for watching until the very end.